Welcome, everyone. I am Frederick, your moderators for today's special discussion. And having worked with sales for most of my professional career and not always knowing what specifically made me successful with customers and clients in different industries, have sort of become curious to a formula in which you can drive continuous development as a sales professionals from a perspective of really wanting to help people and organizations achieve their goals. And you are about to meet three individuals that have done exactly that and whom I've had the privilege of working with and learning from. So we are here to dive in to the insights and ideas behind the book Satisfaction Selling, which is co-authored by these three distinguished experts in the field, Joseph Riggio, Virpi Varjonen, and Henrik Wenøe. So this session will explore how they've managed to merge their extensive knowledge to help transform the art of sales. So let's get started. First off, could the three of you share a bit about your background and what led you to collaborate on this book?
Yes. Sure, so I'll start. I'm calling actually in from Florida. I know we're all around the world in this particular call, and now I'm based here. But a while ago, I began this journey 35 years ago at this point, and was working for myself as a salesperson in an architectural firm. I was a partner in that firm, and I was fascinated by the sales process and decided after about 8 or 10 years doing that kind of work to go into full-time training and consulting of salespeople. Went and got myself a little bit of an education and put myself out in the marketplace and began working with clients, and was fortunate enough to build an international following. And in the process of doing that, a client asked me to do some work for them and develop a particular model for some non-tangible sales or intangible sales. In other words, services and products that were not something that you could put your hands on and touch, like software, for instance. And I did, and it became what we now know as the satisfaction cycle. And years later, that led me to meet my partner in this adventure, Henrik Wenøe. And Henrik introduced me to Virpi, and that's how we're all sitting here together today. So there's a little bit of a background.
Yeah. Virpi, will you go next?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Virpi Varjonen, and actually today I'm calling into this call from Finland, where are my roots. And well, soon I will be heading back to Denmark and back to business as a managing director of a sales organization. So it was 2017 when I started my first training with Henrik at Acuity World, and quite soon I got introduced also to Joseph and continued training quite intensively with both of them until it was like a third year in the personal leadership program that Acuity World runs. I made a study program about the satisfaction cycle. And as a result of that, in my summer holiday, I wrote a little booklet about it, and I sent it to Henrik to ask for some feedback. And then he gave me a call and asked, would you like to write a book with us? And I said, yes, of course. So here we are.
Yeah. And I'm Henrik, and today I'm calling in from Norway, where I'm spending some weeks with my family. That's also why I'm in my holiday vacation look with my typical vacation beard here. I have also been working with sales now for almost more than 30 years, and came into contact with this whole way of operating back in 2000. Where I hired Joseph to train all my colleagues in the company I was working at the time, Dago, because we needed to up our game and take our sales to the next level. And for me, that became the beginning of a journey, transitioning from being a sales and marketing manager myself with my own team to moving into consulting and training. And I think since 2005, I have been running Acuity World full-time, training clients around the world in how to apply the satisfaction cycle in the way they operate with their customers, and that's really what have led me to this task of doing the book. And I would say that we are talking about this book on the satisfaction cycle, and it was a discussion which already began back in 2001. So it had been a book in the making for quite some years, but I think this particular book we have now been working on for 4 years. So it's really a pleasure to now see that it will actually happen. Yeah, and we can hopefully also inspire you now, not only being there in person with you, but also via a book that actually transcribe and describe some of our ideas and thoughts.
Beautiful. I think it's safe to say that you're no news to the rodeo. And Joseph, maybe you could explain the core concepts of satisfaction selling and how it differs from traditional sales methods.
I think there's a couple of points that make sense to address in the conversation really quickly. And the one that's most obvious to people who encounter it for the first time is that we've moved away from a problem-based selling model. So the vast majority of sales models that are out there, all the professional ones and the books that have been written and the trainings that are done, emphasize the idea that you need to have a way to extract or elicit the client's problem, find out what it is that they need to resolve, and then offer them some way to fix the problem that they have. And of course, what you're really doing in the process of doing that is you're also eliciting or extracting what we could call the client's pain cycle, right? So you're helping them to feel bad, if you want to call it that, about what's going on for them so that they have an emotional charge to want to make a decision to move with you. And that's been the lever in most sales process from as long as I've been in the business, and every book that I read early on, and I'm talking back in the 1970s all the way through today. So we're looking, fundamentally at a 55, 60-year span of time where that's been the primary model and still is, frankly, in most of the stuff out there. So I met a guy named Roy Frazier, who I was working with, and he was doing mostly, you could say, therapeutic or coaching level interventions with people, helping them perform at elite levels. And I won't go into his background right now, but he was a master at what he did. And his whole premise was working out of a positive experience and working with people around what he called the excitatory bias, which is actually a neurological position, a way of your brain operating towards positivity and possibility. And I took that as a salesperson and understood if we could apply it with clients, people who were customers or wanted to be customers, and move them through a process of making decisions about what they wanted to buy and purchase, but without having to have them feel bad before they did, it might be really useful. And eventually I had an opportunity to work with a client who wanted to do something in very high-end, very sophisticated sales, and it was in the supply chain management industry. And I went into them and I offered to build this model out. We built the first version of it back in the early 1990s. They loved what they saw. They started getting tremendous results, and we began to expand it over time. And today, what I think also is worth mentioning is over the 30-odd years that we've been using this model, there's been a lot of neurocognitive development that's gone into it as well. Understanding how the brain works, how people actually process information, and sophisticated language patterns. So we've drawn from a lot of different fields, NLP being one of them, linguistics being another one, the neurocognitive science, as I said. And so we built a model that has deep sophistication underneath, but on the surface, it's like driving a car. You don't need to be an automotive engineer to drive a car and get from where you are to where you're going and make it work well. But the sophistication of cars today and the computers that are under the engine is pretty amazing when you think about it. The transition from a car in 1950 to 2024 is very different. And one of the advantages we have right now is we were able to take that surface level, how to drive the car, and put all of that into the book that we've shared with some of what's underneath the engine so that you understand why it works like it does and how to use it really effectively.
Nice. Sounds like a real refreshing take on sales for once. And so I want to ask you, Virpi, you took on this project to begin writing this book based on your own experience training in the sales model with both Joseph and Henrik. Can you elaborate a little bit on the process of taking on what you learned with them and formatting it for this book?
Sure. So when we started the process, I was there where I would say that I had learned the basic tools and techniques. So it was very much on that level. And what I wanted to have from this process is really go through the deeper learning so that I can be where I'm now today to have it integrated fully for my being and my doing. So that was the overall process, and of course there were a lot of phases, and it was kind of going back and forth, reflecting the real, so-called real life, my work, first in the account management, and now as a manager of a sales organization, to reflect things and then go back to the writing board and kind of go back and forth, and also in the conversations with Henrik and Joseph to really integrate it into my way of being and working.
Okay, and then Henrik, last we have you. You've been training client companies internationally using these methods for more than 2 decades now. What would you say stands out the most in the feedback that you get from the clients when they first experience this new model of selling?
I think again there are a few things which stands out. I think the first one is when the participant in the training realize that, wow, I can actually feel great, and my customer can feel great, and we can still do really good business. I think for a lot of people that's really a revelation, because a lot of them have been taught the more traditional sales model that you have to go in and help the customer understand their problems so that they can realize the implication of having this problem. And doing this with people every day, maybe 5, 6 times a day, also there's a risk that you as a salesperson also are left in a not too great state, because it's difficult to talk to people about problems all day and feel great about it. So having this insight that, wow, you can actually go out and have really positive interactions and dialogue with your customers and be successful is really, I often get the feedback that, wow, that's nice. So this is much more enjoyable. I think the other aspect is that when people realize that they don't need to be assholes to be successful in sales, but they can actually treat people in a more ethical way, a lot of people also find it much more easy to truly be themselves as a salesperson. And I got this feedback from a participant in the US a few years back, and she said, very often when I attend trainings like this, I leave the training with a list of things I have to do. With this training, it's really very, very, very different, because I have this feeling that there's something I'm leaving this training with, which I really would like to do. So it also tends to, in a way, foster a much more positive motivation in the salespeople who apply this model. And we have this idea that if the salesperson become more positive, the customer become more positive, and basically are more satisfied, you end up building a much more sustainable and healthy system. And I think these are some of the main things I really take away from this. And I think also the other thing is that a lot of salespeople, they have this sense that it's a kind of a whole model, it's self-contained. So that they get everything they need to actually go out and start to do things with the customers. That there's nothing else they need to begin. And so it's very pragmatic, it's very hands-on, it's down to earth. It's really what connects the sales strategy with the actual actions in the meeting. I think really we build the bridge between these two things in this way of working with customers and salespeople and building business. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. So basically, having applied all these principles, the three of you, and in writing this book, what was the biggest challenge that the three of you faced while writing this book as a collaborative, and how did you overcome that?
Wow. I think there's not only one challenge. I think again, being three very active people, synchronize our biorhythm so that we actually were active at the same point with this project have been not so easy. But I think also again, it have created the opportunity for us to go back and revisit the project a number of times. So I think this is not a book which have been done, over a 2 weeks intensive writing campaign. It's really been written and rewritten a few times. So I think also we have been able in this process to distill much more quality into the book. But I don't know how you see it, the two of you. Virpi, you're smiling.
For me, the key to it was really keeping all of us, all three of us, aligned with the outcome of the book. So we're both, and Henrik and I and Virpi now, after training with us for many years as well, deeply familiar with the model. And sometimes when you get so close to the forest, it's hard to see the trees. You want to describe the bark and the leaves and the roots, and that's not what people really need. And what our clients really want and need from us is they want fundamentally to really become trusted advisors. They want to be somebody that their clients feel good about being with, that they trust and respect, and that they themselves feel like they're contributing something of great value to their clients, not just selling them things. So we wanted to build all that in the book. And I think after many, many conversations, the book took shape and form along that line of working with people to become trusted advisors. And one of the great gifts for me as a trainer, as a coach and a consultant, is after years of working with Henrik, the contributions he's brought into the model, not just learning it and working with it that I developed 30 years ago, but adding things to it and developing it himself and bringing new information. And one of those is called the idea of becoming a positive activist, somebody who your clients are so happy to do business with that they go out of their way to recommend you. They become, in essence, a secondary sales force for the people who are selling to them. So as a salesperson, when I build somebody into this positive activist position, they actually go out of their way to help me do my job with other clients. And they become not just referral sources, but active, participants in my sales process to new clients. So that idea that we could bring that to our customers and we could share this idea in a book of how to become so valuable to the clients you work with and feel so good about what you do that you and your customers build this positive activist relationship is what I think was, for me, most exciting about working in the book together. And frankly, it took a lot of time, as Henrik said. It took a lot of conversations. We took a lot of things out of the book. We added things into the book, and over a number of iterations going back and forth, I'm very proud of what we came up with personally. And I've been doing this for most of my life, and finally have something I can hand out that represents what I think of as part of my life's work.
And for me in this collaboration, first of all, I had to be very humble with the fact that I have never written a book. So that was the starting point. And of course, I wanted as much the outcome of the book, both for myself and for the world. So that was kind of the thing that kept me doing those iterations. And also, of course, the commitment to Joseph and Henrik and having the privilege to share this work. So I think I ended up writing 3 books, 3 times the same book. And of course, then the additional iterations and edits on top of that. So now when thinking back of the last 4 years, it's insane process. But I guess that's also highlights the philosophy we are working with and working as a process, because if something doesn't work, do something else. And when we know what the outcome is that we want to have happen, so then they're just figuring out what's the next step to take towards that.
Yeah, very good.
I will add one more small thing, Frederick, and it's that I just want to compliment my co-authors, if you will. If it weren't for Henrik driving this thing, sometimes with what felt like a buggy whip at the back of the horse, I don't think it would have happened. And he really held it together and pushed us appropriately, not in a bad or negative way at all, but in a way that was really motivating and supportive, but stuck with the process through and through. And as Virpi just said, she probably wrote the book 3 or 4 times and gave us such a sound foundation to work from. As one of the contributors, it made my job a lot easier to show up and add my pieces in. So I just want to make sure before we finish up, I publicly thank them for their contributions and bringing this book into fruition and a reality for myself and for others.
I'll also acknowledge that collective effort that all the 3 of you put into this, and I'm personally very excited to read it. Joseph, we don't have the book in front of us, but could you maybe share an example from the book that illustrates a successful, so to say, application of the satisfaction selling principles?
I think one of the things I will mention is that the book kind of represents, for me, again, 35 years of working with clients. So some of the examples in the book, some of what I'll talk about right now, is coming out of a long history of working with this model and seeing it evolve and seeing clients take it on board. And also, you can't help but to have clients make contributions whether they intend to or not, right? Because they're out there using it and they're applying it and they're coming back and saying, wow, this worked really well. This really changed my relationship with this client after I took this approach versus what I was doing with them. And one of the ones that comes to mind very quickly for me is one of the major clients I was working with for years and years and years was a large organization, which was the Maersk Sealand organization at the time, and now is once again just Maersk, the world's largest shipping container company. And they ship, product all over the world. And the primary routes in shipping are between Asia and Europe and Asia and the United States. And the clients that are producing there produce enormous amounts of goods. So we're talking about literally, in some cases, hundreds or thousands of containers being moved in a year for a client. And one of the situations that occurred is they were seeking to do some work with a particular client who was very committed to another shipping line. And they had been trying to process this particular account for 3 years. And we came in and did some consulting with them. And in the course of that training process and consulting, the person who was responsible for that large account came to me and asked me if I could help him kind of formulate how to think about it. And basically what I did is I said to him, the way to formulate your thinking about this is use the model that we presented. Instead of going in there and once again doing the thing you've been doing for 3 years, talking about the problems they're facing, shipping delays, cost, challenges in getting through customs, all the things that you've been doing for 3 years to try to get the account, which hasn't worked. How about you go in there and talk about what you can do and the positive outcomes you can create? And he did that. And we helped him design a little bit of the language around it so he could have that conversation comfortably. I kind of role played with him a little bit in the course of the training. And a month later, he came back to me and said, we've signed the agreement. We've just written an agreement which will produce $3 million in profit for us next year after seeking to work with this client for 3 years and getting no business at all. And he said the key was really becoming human in the sense of talking to the client as a person, as opposed to a business. So rather than keeping it at the level, which is really common, and I understand why customers do that, of being in a business conversation, the ROI and those kind of things, he went to him and talked to him like a person and asked this question, which was just so fundamental. What do you personally want from the relationship with us? Not what does your business want, not what are the business outcomes and goals, because they knew that was a given. But what do you personally want in the interaction with us? What can I bring to you as an individual that will make it worthwhile for you to take a chance with me to do some business together? And he said that's what made all the difference, is getting into that relationship at a level where it became more personal and more specific to the needs of this particular man, and not just him as a business contact or a business client.
Okay. Virpi, you have an interesting perspective that I'd like to discuss. The importance of what you learned was most important when you transferred this model to others within your own organization, and how the satisfaction selling has emphasized this aspect in relation to customer and clients.
Well, I could talk about this for hours. So I need to pick up some things and those things that are maybe at the first or most important. And if I first start from the sales perspective. So with sales, there are these targets. Targets are numbers. We need to deliver results that are money. And very often, and also in our organization, those targets, they create fear of will I get those results if I go there? So with the satisfaction selling approach, what is the most important thing there is the starting point. When we are starting, what we are talking about, the cream, the excitatory bias, suddenly things change. The world becomes full of opportunities. The market and customers suddenly, wow, all of these things we can sell to everybody, not necessarily everybody, but there are so many of them that we can create some value. And then it becomes our choice. Where do we want to go first? With whom we talk to as a next? And then suddenly, like Henrik already talked, it's a joy. It's fun. And then even sometimes when there are these conversations already with the customers, we realize it's not really where we can bring value. It's okay to say no. We go somewhere else. So that's really kind of giving this perspective to possibilities is from the sales perspective the most important thing from my experience. And from the leadership perspective, leading the sales organization, there I would highlight the aspect of decision making, kind of making decisions from the future point of time, and from the perspective of what do we want to have happen and how do we want to get there in a way that we maximize positive consequences and minimize the negative ones, which always exist. And suddenly this has changed the conversations we have about the decisions. So those are the two aspects I would like to highlight here.
Very motivating. I'd also like to hear from you, Henrik, from your perspective, when employing these skills, what are the key skills that sales professionals, in your opinion, need to develop to excel in this satisfaction selling process?
Yeah, I think, of course, first and foremost, you need to understand the overall strategy, the format. But again, that's only the starting point. I think some of the things you really need to master on an individual level is the capability of leading yourself. So you need to understand what is your intent. Where do you want to go with the interaction you want to have with the client? So you need to have this sense of what you want. And then you also need to have the capability of not having that being everything. So because when you meet the customer, you have to forget about that for a few minutes so that you can understand what is it that the customer really want. So I think we talk about being able to master both being in intention, but also being highly attentive to what the customer really want. And in a way, you need to be able to be in both of those states when you're interacting with the customers. Because if you don't end up with a solution which satisfies your intention and the customer's intention, it will not be sustainable. And again, I know this sounds so damn simple, but for a lot of sales professionals, knowing your own intention is relatively easy. It's not always well structured, but I think that's the easy part. But being able to trust yourself enough to not have everything being about your intention, what you want, but really spending energy and time understanding what is it that the customer want, so that you can understand, is there actually a match and fit here between what I want and what they want? Can we build a solution together that will strengthen both my organization and your organization? I think these are the fundamental skills. And then you could ask, what do you need to master that? Wow, that's what we are also only touching upon in this book, because that's a very big body of work. And I think this is where I think attending a training where you actually get some of these underlying tools massaged into you would be, I think, a big accelerator for a lot of people reading our books. But I think I think this is for me what is most important. Yeah.
So what I hear you say is that the readers from this book will get an insight and maybe an inspiration that they can continuously work on. But what do you hope that readers will take away from the satisfaction selling when they read this book? Are there any particular mindset or a tool that you would like them to adopt on their journey?
I think we lay out in this book a framework we call the 7 C's. And I think it's a very simple structured approach which basically outline the 7 steps you need to master and go through with any customer. So I think you have this outline in a way to calibrate your work up against, so that you always know, am I on the right track? Have I covered C1 before C2, before C3? So you have this structure you can evaluate yourself and your work up against. And I think it's enough to get started. And then I think when you have been out there playing with it, then please come back to us and then let's have a dialogue. We are almost always present, I think, because we were really burn and passionate about this work. But I think, again, our ambition with the book is to give you a playbook you can actually implement tomorrow, the day after you have read it. You don't need anything more to get started. If you want to really master it, maybe you need more than this book. There's more books. There's a lot of other things we offer around this book. But I think our ambition with the book is that you can buy this book, you can share it with your sales team, and then at least you have a very good starting point to create a very different result going into the future for you and your organization. I don't know, Joseph, if you agree with that.
I want to just kind of add something to the conversation we're having today specifically, because I agree with everything Henrik said. There's no way that you can condense 30 or 20 years of experience into a book, even if it takes 5 or 6 hours to read the book, let's say. That's still not 30 years of experience. The advantage we have is most of the people who will be reading the book are experienced salespeople and experienced sales managers. So it will make sense to them in ways that go beyond what's written on the pages, because they'll be able to reference all of that history of their own and update it with what we're offering them. So that's a big step forward for most of our readers. The second thing is, I want to give you what I think of as the main key, the trick, if you want to call it that everything else hinges on. And it's this: if we take that fundamental idea that you asked me about initially, Frederick, about what's some of the things that makes this model unique. And I said, it's this moving away from problem-based selling, or as this mentor of mine, Roy Fraser, used to say, going to where the problem is not, and beginning to build to this excitatory state that Virpi mentioned. Then what we begin to see is there's kind of a magic idea that would lead to a magic question. And the magic idea is, if you can imagine yourself almost as a wizard or a sorcerer and having a magic wand that you could wave over a client and give them anything they want without exception and without limitation, that's kind of the mindset you want to start from. If you could have anything, what do you want? So we're stepping into what we could call a kind of dream state with the client. We're asking them to reveal to us the dream they have about the outcome they want from their interaction with us. What do you want to happen in your organization? What do you want to happen when you buy this product? When you bring these services into your company or to your life, what do you want to be different as a result? If you could imagine the best case scenario, what would that be like? So I often teach clients when I'm doing training to think of it this way, and to even ask questions like, if I had a magic wand, or if I had pixie dust and I could sprinkle it over you and you could have anything, what would that be? Or what would that be like? And as soon as you begin to make this transition from, I'm going to fix a problem, which immediately goes, oh my God, problem, pain, discomfort, to what do you want as a dream that you've been holding, whether or not you believe it's possible yet. If we could produce that together, share that dream with me, the customer's mind changes entirely. And now you literally step into that role of trusted advisor, where they want to do business with you, not just as somebody who's selling them products or services, but as somebody who's become a true partner of theirs in producing outcomes and results. And that's what I think people will get from this book. Not just that idea that I've shared, which they now have if they've listened to this, but the underlying, how do you do this? What are the steps, these 7 C's that Henrik mentioned? All of the theoretical basis that they'll understand after reading part 1 of the book. The playbook that Henrik mentions, which is fundamentally part 2 of the book, to translate this into actionable steps. So by the time somebody's done going through the book, whether they've read every word or they've skimmed through the major ideas, the way that they approach interacting with other people, not just customers in sales, but the way they approach other people in their life, in their business, in their profession, will have changed, because they'll understand this moving away to where the problem is not, to where the dream is. And I think that's the most important thing I'd like to share as we begin to conclude this conversation.
And adding to that point, because what I would like the readers will get from this book, other than the best sales model in the world to create the results in a way that the customer is deeply, deeply satisfied, is the fact what Joseph was mentioning is the implication of using this model to persons themselves. And if more people in the world get that and get that deep satisfaction while they are doing the work, then that would be great.
I definitely agree with that. And on that note, I'd really like to thank you all, Joseph, Virpi, and Henrik, for sharing these insights and the experience that you've had working with this. to me, it's definitely clear that the satisfaction selling can really offer a unique and revolutionary, also effective approach to sales that many professionals, including myself, will find refreshing in both the simplicity and the clarity that you have worked with throughout the past 20, 25 years. So for all the listeners out there, we hope that this discussion has inspired you to explore the book and maybe apply its principles to your sales strategies. On that note, I want to thank you all for joining us and hope to see you again.
Thank you, Frederick. Thank you, Frederick.
Thank you.
Thank you.